Sweet Max, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are things with you?
It's good, man. How's winter in Canada right now?
We had this like really good cold spell for quite a while. And that was like super beautiful and great. And then we warmed up and tons of rain has come in. So like all the snow is gone on the lower levels. And then that has created like a really big like freeze crust up in the Alpine that's like pretty avalanche prone and stuff. So for skiers, so it's kind of interesting right now.
And good for ice climbing down low, though, yeah?
No, it's not. Here on the West Coast, you need like really, for us, like cold temperatures consistently. Otherwise, things warm up so fast, and you're
gotcha.
But we actually did have for like the kind of sea to sky corridor was some of like the best ice years in recent memory. Like I've seen lots of people posting like certain routes are like larger, fatter than they've been in 10 years. Other routes came in like first ascent. So it's pretty interesting. So a bad year to miss ice climbing, unfortunately, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing I don't like about ice climbing is how fleeting it is and how like you could, with us weekend warriors, we got lives and jobs and podcasts to record. We can't just like sit there and wait for the perfect conditions for ice and just be free that day. It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
So I do like that about climbing. Rocks don't change, at least in our perception of time. So
yeah. For the most part, it's a lot more stable medium. That's for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of rocks, we're going to be interviewing Josh Ourada today. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited to, have a really good conversation with him and hear about his story and everything. And I'm also really excited for, the listeners to be able to come along on this journey with us.
For sure. Just a little bit of background on kind of Josh. We're going to let him do most of the introduction for himself, but he was we'll find out whether it's present or past, a soloist. And he took a pretty nasty fall on the Nutcracker. It's a 500-foot 5.8 on the manure pile buttress in Yosemite, something that he had climbed on rope and free solo before. So, we're going to dive into his story about his fall, about who he was as a climber before his fall, and his recovery process, kind of similar to some of our accidents. But, we don't want to dive too much and focus too much onto the accident itself, because there's a lot of information already out there on his accident in the form of forums and magazine posts. So we want to focus this episode mostly on, deeper issues and deeper things in the climbing community that I think this story really highlights. And so, we're just kind of pretty excited to go over this and to dive pretty deep and to hear Josh's story and what he has to say about these pretty controversial topics.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of exciting things coming today.
Me too. Sweet Josh, how's your day? Your morning so far?
It's just starting.
Is that the first cup of Joe or the second?
It's the first.
Nice.
I don't have class till night, so like I'm not usually up much before this.
Nice.
Pretty
cool.
slow morning.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I know, like, God, obviously, like I'm like progressing a lot and stuff through my injuries, but like I will like talk to Ray, my girlfriend, occasionally and like remark like 2 months ago and be like just waking up out of bed, like just the way my life was so like structured completely different and how things would, affect me. And just my time frames were completely off. My sleep schedule was completely off, just like night and day difference compared to like, a couple months ago or like, 7-8 months ago. So yeah, it's interesting.
My first like 5 or 6 months, I don't think I got out of bed before noon unless I had a doctor's appointment.
Yeah. Fair enough, man.
Yeah. I think my time frame was a little bit more condensed, but I definitely went through a period of not leaving the couch with my foot elevated, just watching Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I smashed out The Office like the entire series, and I've seen it like 3 times. I don't know. It's like, yeah. Do you have any like TV shows or anything you like crushing, Josh?
I've seen It's Always Sunny Probably literally 40 or 50 times through.
Oh,
nice.
Nice.
Yeah,
it's always
and
good
I
to have a
think-
really good show like that.
I think since I got hurt, I've watched it probably another 10 or 12 times.
Wow, crazy.
Nice.
I mean, I think that's good. Like, I feel like It's Always Sunny is kind of in like that realm of The Office where it's like,
Yeah.
for at least for me, it's like super lighthearted, really funny. Kind of after you watch it, like I just like my spirits picked up a little bit. You know, like the weight of the world is a little bit less. But
Yeah. It's always nice to have those shows where you can not even watch it, but you can still watch it in your head just by listening to it. It's really good.
Yeah, totally.
For our audience, before we jump into your accident and kind of what happened, I want to know a little bit more about you, just kind of as a person and as a climber. So I'll just kind of ask you to kind of introduce yourself, kind of where were you born and raised, and how did you get into climbing? How old were you, and that kind of background.
All right. Yeah. Let's see. I'm 32. I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Probably one of the worst places for climbing in the country. I started climbing when I was in the military, which would have been like 11 years ago.
Okay.
And kind of once I started, I was hooked, and it's consumed my entire life.
Seems like a pretty relatable story.
Years.
Yeah.
So when you were in the military, where did you start climbing first?
I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, which is
Hey.
outside of San Diego. So,
No way. I lived in San Diego for 26 years.
Mission Gorge was like the first place.
Wow. Yeah.
Kyle, you'll know.
Totally.
Santee, Joshua Tree.
Hell yeah. That's so crazy, dude. We were living in the same city for probably multiple years. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I was there 2010 to 14. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was there. That's crazy. We probably like walked past each other on the trail and had no idea.
I'm sure it happens.
It's a small world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually kind of curious, just like quickly, like, what made you interested in joining the Marine Corps?
Let's see. I went to college right out of high school for 3 semesters where I just drank too much, honestly. Drank too much, never went to class, and it turns out that you can't be a good student if you do those 2 things excessively.
Shocking.
Yeah.
So after 3 semesters, I dropped out. I got caught drinking with the police a couple times, and yeah, I just didn't know what I was doing with my life.
Mm-hmm.
So when I dropped out, I had no idea. I just signed up for the military. The Army wouldn't take me because of my criminal record. And then I went into the Marines one day, and they had me signed up in a couple days.
Nice.
Wow, I love it. Pretty interesting, man.
There wasn't really any thought that went behind it. I just didn't know.
Yeah. Hell, man. I mean, the one good thing about the military, my dad was in the military. I almost joined the military, I think 3 or 4 times. Didn't go in by 2 times myself. And then the 3rd time, I didn't get in because of criminal activity. So I'm with you there. But yeah, I mean, one good thing about the military is, that's a big use for it. If you don't really know where you're going, you don't know what you're doing, you're getting yourself into trouble. It's an awesome outlet to just like plug in and not, get told what to do and like just have some sort of path and direction. And the cool thing is it's 4 years, so you can just get in and get out and ideally kind of use those experiences for something else afterward.
Yeah, it's a good way to get out your delinquency and get paid for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I know a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends who obviously like the military in Canada is probably different than the military in the States, but I'm sure there's a lot of similarities where people I know have like used the military to get like they'll pay for like your college, your tuition, all these different things. Did you like look down any avenues for that or no?
That was a little bit of the reason, was just if I didn't like it, then I would get school paid for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when I joined, I didn't really think of anything other than I need to do something with my life before my dad kicks me out of my house.
Yeah, fair enough.
How long did you end up staying in the Marine Corps?
I did 4 years only.
Okay.
That was 4 too many. So
yeah. And you said that I think we talked before. You said you're working or studying to be a mechanical engineer at this point.
Yeah, I'm
You're getting your
doing
master's now,
grad
I think you
school.
said?
Yeah, automotive engineering.
Oh, wow. That's sick. And did you start school in the Marines or did you start afterward?
I started after.
Okay.
Got out and went back to school, and then got to enjoy getting paid to go to school for 4 years.
That's awesome. So they paid for your school even after you were out of the military?
Yeah.
That's legit.
Everyone that does it, they cover 36 months of tuition.
Wow.
Which ends up being like 9 semesters worth.
Okay.
It's like just enough to graduate.
Nice.
So were you always like mathematically inclined? Because I know you're saying like you had some trouble, throughout high school, a little bit of delinquency and stuff. And, I resonate with that, but I am not mathematically inclined. So mechanical engineering would forever be out of the question. So just
yeah, it's the only like school subject I've ever been good at.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah.
Like, so in high school, like my last year when I was a senior, I was taking like AP Calc and some other AP Physics and that. I never went to class and I was still able to get A's. So so I tried doing that same study tactic of not studying in college, and that's when you find out that sometimes college is much harder than high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with the hard mathematically inclined because definitely never did AP Calc and could not have passed it even if I went to class every single day. So
yeah, I was mathematically inclined throughout high school, but then once math started going into the theoretical kind of like aspect, I lost it. I was like, can't understand like this further removed understanding of like what's going on. I was like, let me just crunch numbers and formulas,
I mean, most of it in the real world, that's all it is. So
yeah,
it's like you spend all those years in college learning the theory, and then you never use it.
Yeah.
I guess something I'm pretty curious about actually though is like, so in climbing, there's obviously like a lot of mathematics and physics at play, and then when I think of the military, I think of like work ethic, structure, exercise. Like, how do you feel that like those two things in your life have impacted like your climbing, your physical activity, and etc.?
I don't think being an engineer has really changed any of that. Being in the Marines definitely has helped me, like, like if it's a big day in the mountains, I know I have to keep pushing and not stop until I'm at the car. It's kind of helped me like push through if you're like kind of suffering.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And then, I enjoy doing really big days and just trying to push yourself, especially alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of like touching closer and closer here to your accident, before we jump into that, I'd like to know just kind of like if you could describe the climber you were as a whole the day of the accident. So not like the day, but you know what I'm trying to say, like the climber you were in that moment. And some of those things I want to know are like just difficulty levels. So like what was your on-site, red point, trad sport, your highest solo level, your relationship with risk, and it's just kind of on those topics.
Let's see, grade wise, I was like a 6/7 boulder at the time, on sighting up to 11 minus trad, red pointing 11 plus trad. I was starting to try 12s, but never really made it too far before I got hurt. Sport, I was on sighting low 12 minus, and then I never red pointed anything higher than 12B, but I also never tried anything harder than that. But I imagine I would have been like 512 plus, 513 minus if I'd ever tried. I had done lurking fear on El Cap, and I was kind of getting to the point where I was trying to transition into doing bigger stuff like that.
Yeah, that was just a few days before your accident, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 2 days.
Wow. Yeah, first when I heard
the
lurking fear, I was like, crap, did he free that? And then I saw, I was like, he ate it a little bit. I was like, okay, Jesus Christ.
I'm actually not familiar with the route. So is it fully up El Cap? Like how many pitches? What does the grade go at?
It's on the southwest side. I think it's only 19 pitches, I think. And they call it's like 5.7 C2 or something. Like I don't know the difference between C1 and C2 really.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the easiest route, I think.
Cool.
Sweet.
Is that a single day adventure there?
Yeah, I mean, we did it in like 20 hours or something.
Wow, that's sick.
Yeah.
It's just, at least on that route, hauling's kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I think hauling's probably a pain in the ass regardless where you're at.
Yeah, I've never like really done any like routes with like aid climbing or any hauling. I think that's something I'm really interested in doing in the future. I think there's a lot of cool stuff to do with that, and also just like the difference of slowly progressing up a wall seems really interesting to me. So I'm definitely in the future interested in that.
Well, I spent like my first 8 years climbing was pretty much bouldering only, and then I kind of got the trad bug, and from there just kind of realized the goals I've wanted to do like years ago that I never thought were possible. That now it's like, all right, LCAP I can do
within reach. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories like that before of boulderers who are just spending years and years working on technical proficiencies and climbing really hard and not focusing on the gear at all. And then all of a sudden they're like, all right, let me try trad. And then they're just like, once they figure out the gear, they can climb like super hard because they've spent 8 years working on the movement. And then all they got to do is figure out the safety aspect to it. So it's a pretty cool transition that I've seen some people do.
Yeah, I kind of wish I would have transitioned when I was at my strongest bouldering, but
I think a good example of that is, isn't it Kevin Jorgensen who did the Dawn Wall with Tommy Caldwell, right? Like,
exactly.
He's like just like super hardcore high ball boulderer. And then I think like the story Tommy Caldwell tells, like when he reached out, he like set him up with like 100-pound pack to like hike up to the top of El Cap and was just trying to like kind of break him to be like, we'll see like if this guy's like actually like ready and into doing this stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting story.
What was your relationship with risk? Like, would you manage it super efficiently? Obviously this is outside of choosing to solo. Just like placing gear, would you run it out? Did you enjoy being run out? Like, what was your relationship with kind of like managing that risk?
I wouldn't really say I was even a risk taker. I'm really good at sewing it up when I'm trad climbing.
Mm-hmm.
As I rope climbed more and I got more comfortable, like I wouldn't even call it running out, but I wouldn't sew it up as much.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I got more comfortable with the gear, slightly more comfortable falling.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for the most part, I'm definitely known to sew it up a lot.
That's good to know. Did you ever on-site solo a route?
Yeah, a good amount.
That's awesome. What was your highest solo grade? Just in general, whether it's something you'd climbed before or something you just approached?
I mean, I've done like upper 5'10" sport, like single pitch sport climbs.
Soloing sport climbs? That's sick. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I would do it at Mission Gorge.
Okay. Damn, that's even sketchier. The rock out there is so polished and shitty.
Yeah.
It's like this river rock, and it's just notoriously polished because all the people from San Diego climb there, and people don't know what they're doing, so their feet are blasting off the holds and stuff all the time, and so it's just like so polished. So props to you, man. You need like a badge or something for that.
I mean, I just climb well below what your red point grade.
Was that a climb that you had project and climbed without a rope before, or was that something that you just tried to like on site?
Oh no, that was something I roped up before.
Okay, yeah. So
when I solo in the past, like I rarely went above like 5'9".
Yeah.
And if I did, it was generally like a sport climb or a trad climb that I would call like a high ball boulder that I just didn't have any pads for.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
But like kind of in Joshua Tree, there's like some pseudo like high ball boulder trad climbs are like 30 or 40 feet.
So, I mean, Kyle and I recently in some recordings, I don't think we've released them yet, but we've had these discussions regarding helmets. And so it's a pretty interesting topic that we've had recently. And I know for myself, like I wear a helmet whenever I climb, regardless of what I'm doing. Kyle, I think, you've expressed that you're in a similar boat. Maybe
no, actually not.
Lax than me. Okay.
I'm definitely way more laxed with the helmet.
I always wear a helmet.
My accident has changed that.
But yeah, I was wondering, like, do you always wear a helmet climbing? Do you prefer to not wear a helmet? If you were soloing, would that change your approach? Just something we're kind of interested in.
Yeah, usually if I was on a rope, at least track climbing for sure, I would try to always wear a helmet. Sometimes I just would forget. I'd say if it was anything over 3 pitches, I always had one. Just It's easy to remember when it's a big day like that for some reason.
So funny. Everybody has their own like little rule, like, okay, when am I going to wear a helmet? And I think I don't want to dive too deep into this now because we're going to cover this later on. But I feel like most of the time people are thinking about when they're going to take it off rather than when they should put it on,
Yeah. So I grew up skateboarding for like 12 years and my dad's worked in the ER. So he always like harped on me wearing a helmet when I was a kid and I always hated it and I never did.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, not wearing a helmet's stupid. Like you can get hit by a little pebble and it can knock you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's, I've got a friend that I work with, Cam, really great guy. He climbs a lot too, but he used to be a skateboarder. Maybe he'd consider himself still one, but yeah, he would say the same thing. Like, yeah, I never wore a helmet ever skateboarding, but climbing, he's like, I got a helmet on all the time. And it's just like this interesting, like depending on the culture of the sport, like it's either taboo or not taboo. Like you don't see road cyclists out without a helmet.
Yeah, without helmets on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. What did your dad do in the ER, if you don't mind?
He started out as a flight paramedic, then he was a nurse, and now he's a physician's assistant.
Awesome. Super, super cool. Really interesting.
Before we jump, I want to jump into your accident here real quick, like very soon. But before we do, one thing I want to talk about real quick, I think a lot of people, when the topic of soloing comes up, because, you were soloing this route that we're about to talk about, it's all negative. So I want to give you a chance to talk about soloing in the positive. I want you to describe the experience you feel while you're soloing. Like, why do you do it? Like inside, like, why do you solo and what benefits do you get out of it? Yeah, if you could just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be subjective for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So like what makes it exciting or like what I enjoy or get from it, it's going to be different than other people. But I'd say like when I enjoyed it the most is if I did like a peak in the mountains, like somewhere in the Sierra Nevada, and summiting and having it all to myself, being the only person around like a 4-mile radius. It's just, I don't know, it's like the most sense of freedom I've ever had.
That's pretty cool.
And then even like, say like, I used to go to Lover's Leap a lot because it's just a nice little place to get a lot of pitches in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, even something like that where it's like it might only be a 3-pitch route, it's still just, at least for me, like as I'm climbing, I'm fully focused on what I'm doing and nothing around me or nothing that I'm dealing with in my personal life. It's just me, my music, and the rock. And then like, yeah, it's a good sense of relief when you get to the top for me. Like this kind of releases any tension I might have had from just daily stress.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that isolation is the biggest aspect to soloing. So if that was the case, what would drive you to solo if there were a shit ton of people around?
Kind of if I already go in with the mindset that I want to solo something that day.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter.
It definitely... I mean, I don't like soloing around people. I'll do it if it's a route I'm really comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. So like I'm not really trying to focus on the people. I'm trying to focus on like, again, the positives. Like, so if isolation is what you get out of it when you're in the mountains, what do you get positively out of soloing when there are other people around it? Like, what is that driving force? What's the benefit?
I'd say it's just, I guess it kind of proves yourself that for me, it kind of like validates my confidence.
Okay.
I don't know. Actually, that's a good question.
Cool. I mean, we can circle back on that because we'll be talking about it later. I guess a couple questions more. Kind of, what factors do you consider when choosing to solo or not?
I'd say it's like 99% of the time is whether or not I feel comfortable. It's like I can be super stoked at the car and like feel 100% prepared to do this, and then I get to the base Like I've had multiple times I've gone 10, 20 feet up and then just wasn't in the headspace for it and just down climbed and called it a day. So it's kind of definitely for me. It's like just being aware of where I'm at, like mentally, and like I feel like I have the confidence to stay comfortable a couple 100 feet up, even if it's a route that I've done a couple times, 100 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. You're bringing up the word confidence a lot. I feel like it seems like people use the word ego, and sometimes that's like used as a bad thing. But it definitely seems like the ego and soloing seem to be tied together a lot. And it's, you had mentioned before, if you think you're going to fall, then you shouldn't be soloing. And it just seems like there seems to be a pretty big connection between like your confidence in yourself and like how you're feeling, and like this ego that we have in terms of our own abilities and how we're feeling and soloing. So it's just a pretty interesting comparison to see.
Yeah, I feel like that level of confidence definitely like toes the line of being like arrogantly cocky versus like confidently aware of what you're doing. I don't know if that's the right word, but
I mean, I get what you're saying, and I'm trying to say, I think that to solo, I think you have to have a little bit of that mentality to pull it off. You have to assume and know in your heart and your mind that you can do it, even though you clearly might not, because if you're thinking that you might not, then the chances of you falling are probably extremely higher than if it were the other case.
I feel like that's got to be the case.
Yeah.
So I've definitely had times where I've gotten scared on a route, and it's because I don't have that like 100% confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like for whatever, like maybe it's just a loose rock that spooked me or something. But yeah, when you get a little distracted, you lose just enough confidence that sometimes you question why you're still there.
Yeah, what the hell you're doing up there? Yeah. I get that on lead sometimes, so I can't even imagine ropeless.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I think this is an awesome place. Max, you want to kind of lead us here into the accident?
Yeah, totally. So, I guess what we're just looking for here is like a brief overview of that day. Like, how are you feeling? Why were you there? Where were you for, listeners who don't know your story, and why did you choose that specific route? And then maybe from there, we'll just kind of dive into that the accident and everything that happened to you.
Yeah, so that day I woke up, it was a Saturday in Yosemite in the spring, which if you haven't been there, it's just a really busy day, and you kind of need to get up early and going, or else you won't get parking anywhere. So I woke up later at like 9:30, went to go meet my friends at Church Bowl parking, which is just a big picnic area that a lot of van lifers go to in the morning. I went to go there. There wasn't parking available. So once there wasn't parking, I just decided to go solo something. And kind of at that point, it was like, well, I picked Nutcracker because I'd sold it for the first time like a week before that, and was just pretty psyched on the route.
So for that day, do you feel like you chose soloing just like out of convenience or efficiency to get more routes in? Or was that like kind of like typical for you that like you'd done the route enough, it wasn't really something out of the ordinary and you felt confident doing it? So
it's kind of like both. It was kind of, I couldn't get a parking spot. It wasn't that I was worried about getting in a lot of routes. It was kind of just like, well, this seems like a good thing to do. If I can't have my morning coffee, I'll have a morning solo and get the same kind of energy kick.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like soloing became pretty nonchalant for you if you're just kind of like on a whim deciding to do it. Is that the first time you kind of just like on a whim decided to solo, or have you done that before?
I kind of got the habit. Like I spent like 2 months in Joshua Tree last winter.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a little crew that like, whether it was everybody would solo together or everybody would kind of just do their own thing. It's like you kind of get up and there's so much easy routes close to your camping there that it's pretty common to wake up and go solo a couple pitches there.
Wow.
And then kind of just with that habit, Yosemite kind of has the same vibe as J Tree. It's kind of just a bunch of dirt bags mixed in with tourists, and you kind of get similar communities.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
But I guess I do it on a whim.
Okay. So kind of like you got to the base, kind of walk us through I don't want to go dive into the details too much because there's a lot of information about your accident already online. So just kind of brief us over for the audience that hasn't heard or anything. We are going to put links to your story and everything in our description. So, they'll be able to check out the details there. Just give us a quick overview just for the sake of this story here, kind of what happened, just a brief rundown.
Yeah. So again, it was a Saturday. It's probably one of the busiest crags in Yosemite Valley, I think, for easy multi-pitch. So I got there and pretty much every route was taken. There's a good route after 6 and after 7, just to the left of Nutcracker that were taken. So I kind of just walked back and forth between the routes, trying to see which one would clear up soon enough to do. And Nutcracker happened to be the one that opened up for me to sneak in.
Okay. And you climbed up. I remember you passed a party. You had asked them whether that was okay, and they said it was fine. And I think you fell at pitch 4. You had said that either a hand or a foot blew. You don't really remember, and that resulted in like a 150 to 200 foot fall. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was like halfway up the 4th pitch on like the crux section, and yeah, it had to have been a hand foot slip, one of the two or both. And
was the section you were in overhanging, slabby? Were you in a crack? Were you on a face? Kind of describe us the features you were on.
It's like this hand crack that it's like a little bulge that you have to pull over. I wouldn't really call it steep or anything, and it slabs out. The hand jams are good. Mm-hmm. The feet aren't great, which I guess it might have been a foot slip, but I've fallen on a rope before and like had my fingers stuck in finger locks. Like I was kind of surprised that if my feet did slip, that my hands didn't stay.
Perfect storm.
Yeah, for sure. Accidents happen, right? And
yeah.
Yeah. And so the terrain itself is not vertical, right? Like when I'm thinking of it for like anybody who's like in BC or anything, like there's a place called the Apron in Squamish, which is like, tons of great moderates between like, I don't know, 4 to 9 pitches. And so not vertical, right? So if you're falling, like what happened to me in my accident is I had a hand foot slip. Like I'm still a little iffy and gray on it. But like I slipped and fell and then was like sliding down this kind of like non-vertical slabby portion until I went like into a granite nub and just like broke both my ankles, right? So that's kind of what I'm envisioning for like what you're falling down, except my fall was like 30 feet and yours seems to be 150 to 200 feet, which is quite a drastic difference.
Yeah. Were you in contact with the rock all the way down? Or were you like bouncing off of it?
Yeah. I think I was just sliding down on like, so I think like my entire butt cheeks were road rash on both sides.
Wow.
I had like my entire hands had road rash on them from, I think, trying to slow down and just grab stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think if it had been any steeper, I probably would be dead for sure.
Yeah.
Because I think like it being low angle is the only reason like my head stayed up. Because I think if I had hit my head even a little bit, it probably wouldn't have made it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's heavy. Like just envisioning it all right now, and it's just like making me feel heavy.
It's really crazy, the aspect of like just falling down a face and kind of like clawing for life and trying to slow yourself down. It's very desperate. So
yeah, it's kind of nice to know that if a fight or flight response happens, that I was at least willing to take the fight.
Yeah,
yeah.
Didn't just like succumb, like. But I mean, either way though, like you never really know, and that's totally that's a response that I feel like your subconscious is controlling. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like, but
yeah, 'cause I was talking to one friend and. Because, obviously everyone tells me, it's like, oh, you're so lucky to be alive. And it's like, yeah, it's true. But I had one friend who's like, well, I don't think you're lucky. I think you just really wanted to live. And your body found a way to make that happen.
It's a very interesting perspective. And I think
yeah, maybe it's not entirely true, but it could be part of the reason.
the power of words, man. I think that it's a heavy statement, and I think that it has a lot of power to it. So I think that latching onto that, and for me, that's what I would believe in. We have a choice to kind of believe what our reality is, and that situation is just so fleeting and hard to analyze. So that particular analyzation of that situation is a really good one, I think. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so for for listeners who don't know, right? So essentially, like, you're top of pitch 4, you've fallen down this face, kind of like clawing and trying to stop yourself, and there's a belay ledge. The top of the third pitch is what it is, or correct me if I'm wrong.
It's the start of the third pitch.
Okay, start of the third pitch, and and so you essentially fell and decked that ledge, and I believe there was a gentleman who was actually at that belay stance, right?
Yeah.
And then
I believe he had to jump out of the way.
Mm-hmm. That's what I read, at least.
Do you remember like sliding in the impact point and everything, or were you like blacked out, or if you don't mind, like just taking a little bit of that?
I was conscious the whole time. My memory is not as good as I thought. Like, I definitely remember at some point falling. I remember seeing the ledge, knowing that hopefully I was going to hit it, because I think that's the only thing that's another thing that kept me alive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't remember, like, honestly, as much as I thought. Like, I know I hit it at some point. Because I broke his phone apparently, and my phone was somehow fine, so I gave him my phone. I'm assuming I don't know if he called search and rescue or whatnot, but I had him text my friends and just let people know what was going on.
From what I read, there were a lot of parties around the area that day, and some of them heard like a scream, like some sort of verbal, something's not good, and then a loud thud, and immediately called search and rescue.
Yeah.
And so it's, to me, from what I read through these articles that are out there on the internet, it was like someone that didn't even know what happened or didn't even see what happened. It was all audio, which is really crazy that your accident, just from the sounds, knew, that that's search and rescue regardless of what happened. So that's pretty interesting. And I read also that you landed in a seated position on the ledge.
Yeah, I think I landed sitting on a boulder.
Jeez.
Which that also might have be the reason I don't have multiple broken legs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, crazy. Were you like cognizant, like aware of your injuries, like when you were seating there? Like were you like kind of assessing your body, or did the injuries you had sustained, like, and the event, was it like so I don't know, I guess like so traumatic that maybe you were just kind of in like shock? Like if you don't mind talking about that a little bit.
So I had a punctured lung, which I think was distracting me. I don't even remember if I felt pain. I assume I did, but I think I was distracted enough by like not being able to breathe very well from a punctured lung. And then Cole, the guy that was there, I'm pretty sure he was handling me pretty well in terms of like not letting me get into shock or anything. But I don't honestly know if I knew like the severity of how broken I was at that time. Because like I think it took 2 to 4 hours to get me off, and
wow,
I remember maybe like time. 2 minutes of the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
2 to 4 hours. That's heavy.
And I don't even actually know if it was 2 to 4. Like it might have been shorter. I'm not sure, but I think I remember reading that I was up there for a couple hours.
I mean, having search and rescue get called, having them understand where you are, choosing whether or not to wrap you down or pull you off with the helicopter, and then pull you off the wall with the helicopter, bring you to, El Cap Meadows. I think that's what it's called, right?
Yeah.
And then transfer you to another hospital. I'm sure, just logistically, that's, I would say, at least 2 hours. So, that's probably an accurate time frame.
Yeah, I know. I know for my injury, I felt really like guilty and like upset at like feeling the need to call search and rescue and like not self-extricating myself. For you, obviously, that was like kind of given that you weren't going to be capable of doing that. So definitely a different circumstance. But I'm wondering if at the time you were aware of like any feelings of like guilt or how you process that. And as well, like one other caveat to that, like Kyle and I have discussed this, like in Canada, there's this socialized kind of healthcare system, whereas in the US, there's definitely differences to the healthcare system. So I'm wondering, did you have to float the bill for your rescue?
So I think I was in too much pain, or just I was in too much trauma to think about like feeling guilty about having to call search and rescue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that thought never came up until like after I got out of surgery in the hospital. I was surprised. I mean, in a sense, I was really fortunate because I'd been out of work for like 8 months because I just living in the van on the road. So I actually got signed up for, I think it's Medicaid. So I have not seen a single bill from any of this.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I will. Or sorry, that's a lie. I've gotten like $20,000 in bills from like x-rays and stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I'm still trying to figure out if I actually have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I haven't seen a single bill. And I think I read from another poster like the helicopter bill alone was probably 50,000+.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's so for me, like the Canadian over here, I don't know what the Medicaid program. So how does that work? Was that something that you were eligible for because you had been out of work, or?
Yeah, essentially because I was unemployed and quote unquote homeless.
I love it.
I've never heard of
it's
Medicaid.
Kind of like the US is like standardized. If the US had standardized healthcare,
yeah,
for everyone, it's what Medicaid would pretty much be, I believe.
I've never heard of Medicaid covering a helicopter flight, though.
Yeah, I don't know how. I haven't seen a bill yet. That's all I know.
That's man. Don't ask for the bills. Just wait.
And I haven't been called by like creditors or whatever they call them.
Okay.
Loan collectors.
Yeah.
So far I'm okay.
That's awesome, man. Good to hear.
And yeah, it's just like why it makes you question why we don't have this for everyone in the country.
Totally.
Which is another topic in general, but
yeah. For sure, definitely a different topic for the day, but yeah, super super happy to hear that that's not another thing that you have to deal with in your life, because that's just like this added layer.
I mean, within the first couple weeks, I already decided like I was already expecting to have to take out my retirement money and declare bankruptcy. Like I was prepared to do it if I had to, but obviously pretty happy not to.
Yeah.
No
kidding.
I personally have gone through bankruptcy, and I will say like there's a lot of negative connotations that are attached to it, but it is sick. The fact that you can, like, if you get yourself into an accident like that and you have just this absorbent amount of debt, the fact that there is a path for you to take where you can just magically wipe it away. And if you're, like yourself, you said you were living in a van and stuff, you don't have that many personal effects. Like you're not really giving up that much, and you get a clean start and you get a clean, fresh, beginning. And I think that's just a really magical thing that, is out there. So I just wanted to kind of paint over that negative connotation a little bit.
When it was the biggest worry, which would be like the first month or two, I honestly I could care less at that point if I had to, because I was much concerned about just being able to walk or like move again. That losing whatever money I saved up I didn't care.
Totally.
So it's like I still have 40 years of my life to make money if I need it.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, really glad I don't have to.
Yeah. We're kind of cruising along here on the time frame. I want to kind of jump a little bit. Just quickly, if you could talk about just the immediate like mental devastation of realizing kind of the situation that you were in reference to your injuries. I can imagine, you're saying that even the rescue and everything was just a blur. What was that moment like when you just like, you realized the situation you found yourself in?
I'd say it probably took like so I was in the ICU for like 4 or 5 days, and I don't think it really hit me until I was out of the ICU. Because I think because I think that's once I was out of the ICU, I no longer was getting like pain meds dripped into me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not exactly high all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It takes a while before, especially at the time, like I was being told I'm not going to be able to walk again because they thought like my injury was worse than it turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they try to be pretty honest with you because every spinal cord injury is different. So like they don't know if you'll be able to walk or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like the first couple of days of that was just like, fuck, this is the worst decision of my entire life. Like,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, just replaying that in my head, wishing I could go back and not do it that day.
Yeah, that is a heavy feeling for sure. There's nothing you can do about it either.
And then I've been dealing with this like quasi survivor's guilt because I survived a fall that a lot of people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then not only did I survive, but I didn't even get as injured as I probably should have. So it's, like some days I'll read stories of people that maybe not even a climber, just someone fell like 5 feet off a ladder and
died.
They're paralyzed from like the neck down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, shit, I fell farther than anyone should. And I mean, all things considered, I'm doing pretty damn well.
Yeah, I there's just got a general blanket statement that says, every 10 feet is 10% chance that you're going to die. You far exceeded that 100%. So it's a miracle.
Do you mind just real quick, just for any listeners who like haven't read your write up and your story and stuff, just like listing your injuries and kind of like your prognosis or diagnosis?
Yeah, let's see. I had an open fracture of my cuboid navicular calcaneus in the right foot, which is the heel and foot bones. My left heel, I had like a big laceration that took like 20 something stitches. I had 2 small pelvis fractures that were basically nothing. So I was pretty lucky. The main thing was L1 burst fracture. I lost like greater than 50% of the vertebrae's height.
Wow.
It caused a spinal cord injury. I fractured my sternum, broke 2 ribs, broke my thumb, and then had punctured lung. And I believe that was it. Yeah.
It's quite a list.
Yeah, it's quite a list. I guess that's just what I was clarifying when you're like, oh, like I'm like lucky or not as injured as I should have been. It's just for someone who maybe hasn't read your accident report. It's like, you're still quite injured. You're very, very lucky to be alive and made it off that ledge. Like,
I just got like, within the first month or two, like random people messaged me on Instagram. They're like, oh, I fell like 40 feet, but theirs was like a more vertical fall. And like they broke both their legs, or maybe they didn't get a spinal cord injury, but they broke like multiple vertebrae, where I managed to only break one. Granted, it was a pretty good job, but I just would have expected like multiple, like both legs broken, maybe a broken arm or 2, multiple. Yeah, I would have expected a lot worse than what actually happened.
Just means you're here for something bigger,
Yeah, that's what. I hope there's a reason.
Hey, that's up to you, man. That's up to you.
Yeah, I had a friend who asked me that, if she was like, do you think there's a reason why you lived and maybe others weren't fortunate? And I just told her, it's like, I hope there was some higher calling for me that I don't know about.
I think that's, time will tell. I think that it's not something you can just be like, oh yeah, that's why I survived, I think that, ideally, with, the time will come where you look back and you're like, all right, like, I get it. I understand, like, this is why I survived. And, you'll have a little bit of closure on that note.
Yeah. I think the idea that you need to have some like prophetic realization, like right away or something.
Right away.
It's
yeah.
Like, things take time. You got to heal. You got to deal with your life and things. So,
especially when it really comes down to life's just not fair. So like, some people just get the short end of the stick, and I somehow got the long end of it. And
yep.
I think I'm trying to dwell on it less and less, and just appreciate that I'm still here, and like try to keep living my life the way I want to.
Yeah. So
for sure. Will Gadd has a quote where he kind of, I'll take it out of context or something, but it's just something about like the universe doesn't love you. And he said it kind of sarcastically, and it's like, it's very true, like sometimes people get the idea that like, the world is like created for them or something. And it's just, unfortunately, things happen. Just, I know for myself, like when I was in the hospital, just what I'll call is like the like mental devastation of just, your thoughts are running over in your head like a washing machine. You're feeling really depressed, thinking about the accident, the mistake, just ruminating on that kind of, that experience, how was that for you, and how did you overcome that if you felt like you have? Because I'm imagining that weighed really, really heavy on you.
I mean, up until the past like month, I think pretty much every day there was a point where I wish I died. I wish I was dead. Like, yeah, I wouldn't say I really handled it too well. I mean, I definitely like the last like 8 months or however long it's been like the most depressed I've ever been. And then up until like I kind of moved out on my own, it's like the first time it's like I might go more than one day where I don't wish I was dead, which is like a big improvement from where it was like at least once a day. It's just like, I fucking hate this. Like, why am I still here?
Yeah. Wow. Really, really, really happy, man. Yeah.
Who's been your support group throughout this process, and kind of, you have to think about moving forward instead of looking back and being regretful. Like, what is your outlook for the future, and who's been there to support you?
I mean, like close friends and family have been there the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I've been good about like I've been pretty good at self-isolating through all like the depressed times or like the worst ones. So, but yeah, I mean, I've had like a core group of people that are always there if I need them.
That's good.
And then the
future kind of
like, it's becoming more optimistic. I mean, up until like the end of the year, like I definitely just had I don't know, I just didn't care about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm getting like more mobile and kind of more accepting of where things are. Like, if things don't get any better for me, that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'm still, yeah, I mean, I'm re-psyched on climbing again, which has helped a lot. Just something to get my mind off other stuff.
Yeah, I saw you in the gym top roping. I was like blown away when I saw that. I was like, oh hell yeah, that's awesome, man. So it's really cool to see you getting back there. And this is something that Max and I were talking about a little bit. It's so important to have that. You were talking about in the military. Your drive to keep pushing and to keep going through hard circumstances. And obviously, this is a lot different than going up an alpine objective and coming back in 20 hours. This is the longest alpine objective of your life at this point. It's just, it's so important to keep, to keep pushing and to keep that eye on the prize. And I think that, climbing, it did get you into this problem, but it's also probably going to be what gets you out of it as well. So it's really cool to see you still pushing for that and keeping that fire alive.
Yeah, it really just comes down to I have no other hobbies.
Fair enough.
And like that's been very apparent through this whole injury process, because I haven't had to do anything. Like, I just had so many hours a day to fill, and like I don't play video games.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been artistic, so I don't like having instruments. Like, the whole time I'm just sitting there bored out of my mind because like I can't climb or do anything. Like, I can't just go ride a bike or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's just so much to deal with, and obviously just filling the time when you're injured, right? And like after a certain amount of TV or whatever, you're just ready to pound your head against the wall and feeling like trapped inside your own home and trapped inside your own body with new limitations. So that's just such a challenging thing to deal with and to overcome. And yeah, man, feeling for you dealing with that and stuff. But I think that definitely, I think that definitely drives into, I mean, unless if you're okay to like kind of move on a little bit here, Kyle, into like,
yeah, totally. I think we're definitely good to move kind of out of the accident and out of, your personal story, as it were, and move on to the more of these kind of deeper topics about kind of what we can pull from this accident. I guess it's just a very general question to start this whole thing off is, how has this accident kind of like made you view soloing? Has that changed at all?
No.
No.
I mean, yeah, I don't view it negatively or more positively. It's just, yeah, it's part, I mean, I took the risk and I just happened to have one of the worst things happen that could.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think it, yeah, I mean, I would probably solo again if like I ever got to the point that I could solo again, but I don't know if my body will physically be able to.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Yeah. Like I think, obviously soloing is such a heated and controversial topic and debate, and it's such a personal decision, but people don't seem to view it that way. Right. There's so many other things to dive into and the way it's affected, people and their lives. And so I think it's really interesting to hear you say that you would still like make that choice for yourself, and that, this experience hasn't really changed that for you. I think there's something really, really interesting and really powerful about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, how does your family feel about soloing and kind of this, like, this process and stuff? Have you talked to them about that?
It's never really come up. Like, I don't think they really get it, like one way or the other. They're probably just like, I think for like my dad, for instance, it might be, the same as when I was skateboarding. I didn't want to wear a helmet. It's like, well, why the hell would you do that? It's just stupid. Like, even though like maybe 99 out of 100 times you're not going to need the helmet, there's that one time that you do need it, that it could drastically change your life, which is kind of the same with soloing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's never really come up at all. I think they're just glad I'm alive and still trying to push hard.
Yeah, I mean, you say that it's out of the question for now. Do you think, I guess you kind of answered this question, but like, do you think that, are there moments when soloing is unnecessary to begin with? And if not, like, when do you feel like soloing is an acceptable risk? Like for our listeners, maybe someone who's thinking about soloing and is inspired by these positive benefits that you talked about, like, when is it unnecessary and when is it an acceptable risk? Like, what is that line?
I mean, I can't answer that for anyone else. It's all
personal journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to influence someone one way or the other to do it or not do it. It's, you got to be comfortable with the risk you put yourself into and potentially put others into.
Yeah. Totally fair. I respect that
it's kind
answer.
of like, it's like if you choose, I don't want to say soloing is a religion, but like it's kind of like choosing a religion. You have to find something that hits you like spiritually, or like there's a reason why you're attracted to that religion or this kind of spiritual guidance or something.
So yeah, I guess the line would be like, ask yourself why you're doing it. If you're doing it for the exposure, or you're doing it for fame, or you're doing it because it's attached to your ego is like really huge, and you want to do it because you want to impress people. Like, those are the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I think in the era that we're in now, where there's so much like social media dominant things and constantly showing like, adventure and the highlights of people's lives, that's like the majority of what, like, or at least I feel that like social media is filled with. And Kyle and I have kind of talked about this and touched on this before. But yeah, it is really interesting to see, with these new films like The Alpinist and, Free Solo, and just the infamy that you get from soloing. Like, is that affecting people's perception of it? Is that inspiring people who maybe should not be soloing to solo? Because back on what you guys just touched on, right? Like, you need to, at least I'm not a soloist, so I'm just, speaking from like third party commentary, but I feel like you need to have a really strong why in why you are soloing, and you need to be really, really set on that. Your confidence, your competency, You could call it spiritual awareness of yourself. All those things need to be in line, because it's only for the very best people on their very best day, you know what I mean, like performing on those routes or solos, whatever you want to call it. So
see, I feel like the Alpinist was actually good because it didn't really like 100% idolize. It wasn't entirely about soloing. It was just about this guy that's just an insane climber and he's pushing his boundaries. And I almost appreciate like the Alpinist more because he did like a couple huge solos and he purposely ignored getting media attention for
it. Totally. Yeah, the media were like trying to find him and chasing him around and all pissed off. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And I know I mean, I'm not like knocking Alex Honnold. I think there's a lot of things you could talk about that, or Free Solo. I think it's an amazing movie and I was very inspired and really enjoyed that. But I agree with you. I resonated with the Alpinist more and the story and the tragedy of it. It was very powerful and very moving. And I remember thinking afterwards, like, just, you know, even though Jean-Marc is gone, he's really impacted just so many people's lives and just inspired so many people to just kind of like, or at least inspired me, I feel, to seek a life of like adventure and to also kind of like take a step back sometimes from, you know, like I really love to present myself on social media platforms. And sometimes I'm guilty, like other people are as well too, of presenting things, you know, more ideal than they are. And I think, yeah, like seeing him not be interested in having people there and just trying to be in the moment, present, having those experiences. I think that was a really powerful thing and a really like, really powerful and bringing to light like a breath of fresh air in like the modern world we live in, where just everything is just posted, go, and it's usually just really good successes.
Well, it's like what I like about the Alpinist isn't even the soloing parts. Like what drew me to it is just him climbing in like alpine conditions, even roped up. It's like I haven't even seen Free Solo, and I don't think I ever will because I just don't care to watch that.
Okay.
Like it just says, for me at least, just someone soloing like that's not, I don't know. It doesn't like, it's insane what he did, but it doesn't inspire me to do my own stuff.
Yeah, it's so out there.
Yeah.
So I think this kind of brings us to kind of one of the topics I want to cover, you know, with Free Solo, you know, and Instagram in general, and media, climbing media in general, and honestly outside of climbing media, I think that just media in general in terms of action sports, it seems like risk is glorified a lot. And a lot of the times unnecessary risk is glorified, but the consequences of those exact same risks are then shamed. Like, can you comment on this like paradox we're finding in the media and in climbing specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced it personally, but it seems like sometimes the professional, whatever it is, they take the high risk. They're successful, yeah, and then they're glorified with higher contracts or media attention. And then Joe Blow, who's an amateur at whatever he or she does, they get hurt or they get killed, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, they were taking too much risk. Whereas like if the professional died, it would probably be, oh, well, he died doing what he loved. She died doing what she loved.
Interesting. So,
whereas it seems like the amateur is just like, oh, they're just stupid and they don't know what they're doing.
Interesting. So you're saying that there's this line between, you know, people who don't get shamed because of some sort of title that they have versus the people, you know, the majority of people who aren't in the mainstream media are getting shamed for essentially the same actions, just on a different level.
Yeah, it seems to happen. I don't know if it's entirely true, if it's just a generalization, but like I definitely got like shit on by the trolls on Instagram whenever there's articles posted, which, you know, it's understandable, but some of it's just, if I was Alex Honnold, they'd probably be like, oh, wow, he died doing what he loved, or like, it's a shame. But
yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, it's just this crazy juxtaposition between, you know, that people are dealing with.
Well, I think the metric there needs to be competency. Because, for example, you were saying you're soloing like the Nutcracker. What's the grade? 5.7 or something?
5.8.
5.8. Okay, and you could climb like into the 11s and the 12s. So if you're looking at the disparity there in grades of what you're soloing compared to what your actual climbing point is, that's probably a greater margin of error than Alex Honnold, free soloing Freerider, because I think his top climbing grades are probably like 14C, 14D, and like some stuff on Freerider I think is like 13A, B. So there's like a larger disparity there. Not that like we're really trying to like comment or something like that, but I think the metric needs to be like, competency. Like, did the person was the person engaged, and did they know what they were doing, and were they doing it for the right reasons, and did they assess risk appropriated in their life? Because, for example, if you were like a 5'9" climber and then you're like, oh, like I'm just going to solo the Nutcracker for the day, like it would probably affect my opinion of that. But like from what I know about you from reading the article and everything, it seems like you had the right approach to how people should be soloing in a sense, if that makes sense. That's the feeling that I'm getting from it.
I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I would like to agree with that.
Yeah.
I think like looking back, I wasn't in the right headspace the day I fell to solo, and I obviously didn't want to. I either wasn't aware of that myself, or I didn't believe that. That day I was like, that day is when I crossed the line of confidence to like probably too big of an ego or cockiness, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a good example of what I'm trying to talk about is I think it's called the Flatirons in Boulder, Colorado. There was like an individual there's actually a GoPro video of this.
I watched that video, dude. It was insane.
Yeah.
Oh, are you talking about the guy that
Kyle something or whatever?
The grade.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like supposed to climb a 5'9" and ended up on a 5'13", and it was like, well, if you can't tell
he was in running shoes too.
Yeah, if you can't tell the difference between 5'13" and 5'9", you should not be soloing things, because like there's a really big visual difference. There's a difference, like just it's quite, and so not to hate on him so much. Like, I'm sorry for that person and his accident. I heard he made a full recovery. I wish him all the best. But that would be an example to me of like, okay, like that doesn't seem to be in the right mindset or headspace. Like, you don't even know the route you're on. The grade is 10 times harder. Like, there's so many like errors there that you can actually are really within your control. Whereas like popping off of a hold, it's within your control to the extent of like climbing, but like those are accidents that happen. You know what I mean? Like, so, yeah.
Yeah, I just read that story the other day for the first time. Yeah. I think I feel like that's how the majority of people that don't understand soloing look at it, is like, oh, this person had literally no idea what they're doing. Or like, he was apparently comfortable enough to solo, but yeah, not being able to decipher 5'9" versus like 5'13" is, I don't know how you could ever be that comfortable.
Even visually, you should be able to see it and just be like, probably not what I should be on. But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, I've tried to solo like some 5'8" like friction slab before, that I think I made it up a bolt or two, and like even at 5'8", I was like, you know what, like I know I can do this, but I'm just not comfortable with this. Like, I'm just going to go down because I want to live another day.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying. So I guess a question here that I'm pretty interested in is do you feel lucky that you survived your fall, or do you feel like remorseful that you lived?
It's definitely dependent. I don't know if I ever feel lucky that I lived. I might be like impartial, but I'd say easily for the past like 9 months, most days has been like, some days it's like remorseful that like I survived something I probably shouldn't have. And then there's other days where it's not necessarily remorseful. It's more just like, fuck, I hate all of this. Like, can it just end?
Yeah. Because I know when we spoke previously, you had mentioned that, when you were soloing, you just not envisioned yourself doing this, but like, had you ever fallen, you had just accepted that you were going to die, and obviously that happened and you didn't die. Like, you miraculously lived, and are alive. And in a sense, death would be so much easier. I mean, there's a whole religious and spiritual debate people can get into of whether there's life after death or whatever. But for me, the reality is like someone dies, their suffering ends. Like you don't exist anymore. You are dead. But having to live through this and deal with the trauma of it and kind of survive and find your footing again, like that's really challenging. That's really hard. And that's there's so many people living that existence, whether it's from a fall soloing or you get T-boned on the highway and you're paraplegic, like there's so many people just living with unbelievable trauma and they just have to.
Well, yeah, that's what kind of makes it harder is like there's so many people that it is 0% their fault and they're in a worse position than I am. And when in reality, like, yes, this was an accident, but I could have prevented it 100%. So like, yeah, it just comes back to like, I think the hardest thing I've been dealing with is more just like survivor's guilt versus anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the last kind of topic I want to cover here before we close this off is, we talked a little bit about shame and you experienced that a little bit on Instagram, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a lot of the heat you got was for climbing above another party. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was definitely like the biggest point of contention.
So I want to kind of talk about, personally, I feel that if you ask that party if they're comfortable climbing above, you climbing above them and they say yes, I think that's a green light. And I think there's nothing ethically wrong with doing that. My bigger question that I want to ask is, what are the ethics in your mind about climbing around other people, soloing in general? Because if you do fall, in your case, you survived, but more often than not, you're just going to drag everybody else into kind of this shit show mess. And more often than not, leaving, you'll be dead and you won't have to deal with any of this mess. And you're leaving this giant mess for people to clean up, like literally, emotionally, mentally. So like, what are your thoughts on soloing around other people and the situation that you're risking putting them in and not yourself?
Yeah, like up until I fell, I never really thought about it much.
Okay.
It's like, I don't know if, like, Kyle, if you've ever done Cathedral Peak and Follow Me.
I've not, no.
Okay. Oh, I'm sure you at least know, like, it's one of the most popular multi-pitches in California in general, probably. But like that thing will have 30 different parties on a 5-pitch climb.
Jesus.
Maybe not like this.
I got you. Exaggeration. Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah. And then in between that, there'll be soloists going through.
That's crazy.
And it's like, just the amount of people on that, it's just as much of a cluster as like a soloist going by. Sorry, I don't even know where I'm going with this. Yeah, I've never really thought about the impact like I would have on others.
Okay.
Because like I never expected to fall.
How about now?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, now it's definitely there because it's been brought to my attention by a lot of people. And I think it's like a legitimate conversation, but
like, I guess I'm trying to get you to make a little bit of a statement here. Like, ethically, do you think like soloing should be reserved for those moments like you were talking about in the Alpine where you're by yourself? And if you're going to be climbing around other people, it should just be roped just to kind of prevent this situation from ever happening? Or do you think that's too much restriction?
I think it's way too much restriction. I mean, I don't know. Like, if I ever were to solo in the future, I would not do it around any other one for that reason. I mean, more often than not, I tried to avoid people as it was. But whether other people, I don't know. It's just such a personal thing. I don't like to be that person. Like, I've been on routes before where I'm roped up and a soloist asked to pass. Like, I'll never say no. Like, I'd rather them keep moving on than
just hanging
stick around. Like, it's like, it just makes me more comfortable knowing that they're out of my sight.
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to hold a soloist up because then maybe they start getting uncomfortable and it's like, all right, now they're in this shitty position. I don't know. I think like, I mean, yeah, like that. That's just like, it's a weird ethical question.
For sure. I mean, I think that you brought up an interesting point too. Like, soloing around other people, you're not only putting them in a situation where like, if you fall, it's a big mess, but you're also putting them in a situation where they have to like make this decision of whether or not they want you to pass, and like now you're like it's this kind of awkward dance between like passing them, not passing them, and stuff. And so it's just a lot that goes into it when you're starting to solo with other people around.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't do it enough to think about it, and then obviously like no one thinks about it until the situation where someone almost gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So like, at the end of the day, like I feel terrible that I put other people, even if they weren't in physical harm, just like having to deal with that trauma of like seeing someone almost dying and then being with that person for 3 hours or whatever it was until they get rescued.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm definitely
like,
not...
I just want to,
go ahead.
If I cause like mental trauma to someone, I'd feel worse than like the fact that I'm broken right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm definitely not trying to blast you or to kind of shame you at all. I just wanted to kind of try to open that ethical question and see kind of what your perspective was before and after the accident. So, thank you for sharing that.
I know for myself, I was, reading through your threads and stuff like that. And I've personally had soloists pass myself, and they've always been really, really kind and courteous. And I've kind of been in the same boat where I'm like, well, you're going to be so much faster and efficient, and I don't want to affect your mindset or your day. So like if there's an appropriate place to pass, like, of course. But until actually reading your thread and your story, I had never actually given the consideration of, a soloist being like an overhead hazard if they fall. That's never something that has crossed my mind. But yet, if another rope party passed, if I'm letting them pass, I am accepting an inherent risk by they can drop pieces of gear on me, which I've almost had happen. I've almost been like smashed by an ATC piece climbing, like, or, they can drop rocks. So there is this level of risk that you have to take and assess when you let people pass. But I think it's kind of interesting that most people, or at least speaking for myself, I never really viewed that as a risk assessment. It was more like, oh, I'm in a line at the store and this person's going to be faster than me. So I'm just being like courteous as a human being. But like there actually is more of a discussion there to be had. So I think that is interesting, Does the risk that a soloist pose, is that simply just because they're soloing is no longer acceptable? And are you void of assessing that risk as a climber once again, just simply because it's a soloist? If we just replace soloists with rope party, people would I feel like would just completely accept that inherent risk and be like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. Or, oh, accidents happen. This guy dropped something or a rock dislodged. It's tragic, but an accident happened, Whereas the second you replace it with a soloist, there's kind of this like negative connotation of like, well, fuck that guy. So,
like, it's kind of frustrating because I think it's a legitimate debate. Like I'd never even thought about that before. It's like when someone passes me, like the last thing I think about is me getting hurt because they're falling, even if they're in a rope. I think it's like the statistics of that happening are so low relative to the amount of people climbing that it's just not something I think I just don't think you think about, because it's like the chances aren't that high. And it's such a freak thing that I would never in a million years have even thought about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, where does the climbing community go with this? I have zero idea.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting debate to be had, and I think just even what we just talked about, which is actually assessing a soloist as an overhead risk, that in itself is actually a really, really interesting thing and a really good message, I think, to get out to, like, for people to understand, like, yeah, actually do assess that as a risk next time, someone's being offered to pass you, because you do have the right to say no. If you're uncomfortable and a soloist is trying to pass you, like, you can be like, like, I'm here, I'm struggling, I actually don't feel comfortable with you doing that. Like, I think you as a climber have every right to say that. So I think it's
yeah, I mean, if you're on the route first, like, you have, I mean, this person solo can just blast by you if they want, but it's pretty disrespectful.
Yeah, would agree.
I mean, I've definitely seen people say no. Sometimes even if it's a rope party, they're just like, yeah, I don't want you to pass me. Like,
yeah,
just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's just one of those interesting ethical questions / dilemmas, and there's not necessarily like the objective, this person's right and this person's right. It's like there's a lot of nuance in there and a broader discussion to be had. Something I am interesting, I know like we're kind of running up on time here and stuff, but if you don't mind, like something that I'm interested in knowing about is like, like people posting accident reports and like talking about mistakes and injuries and like getting shamed or, you know, being mocked for their experience. I think there's a really interesting aspect to, we need to be able to like critique and criticize and analyze like people and their actions and situations. And it's really important to do in sports that revolve around safety, right? Like you want to learn from those situations. But my take for a lot of stuff in the media is there tends to be a lot of really unconstructive like shaming, where people, you know, just kind of keyboard warrioring and just not really being constructive at all, and just affecting and shaming other people, and also just like not realizing that there's a person behind, you know, those remarks and those comments. And so as someone who's kind of experienced and gone through that, I'm wondering what your opinion is around that, and also like how you feel it affected yourself, like hear those remarks and have people, you know, comment like that about you online.
Yeah. I mean, I use social media, but I think it's like the bane of our existence at this point. And I think no matter how you bring up a topic online, it just automatically becomes toxic. It seems like, for the most part.
Yeah.
Even if the intention isn't there, it's hard to interpret text through a computer screen.
Yeah. Talking about keyboard warriors, I think it's really easy to just.
It's like, yeah. So I don't remember what everyone said about me. Some of it was just like, you know.
I honestly went through it and it wasn't that bad. I went through the forum and it was pretty, I would say it's pretty tame. I posted my accident report and got like.
Mountain Project wasn't bad.
Okay.
Like when Climbing Magazine posted an article, it's like the people that comment on that was just like, holy shit. Like,
yeah,
I understand how you could feel that way, but like, I mean, there was a point I was mad enough that I had a cast on my left hand, cast on my right leg, my left foot was bandaged up, my right foot was bandaged up. This was like when I could barely sit up on my own, and like I was honestly enraged enough that I would have tried to fight someone in that position just because it's so personal at that point.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like you can say that, yeah, I was stupid, but like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're not providing a constructive argument around that, like, you're entitled to your opinion, but at the end of the day, you can just keep that to yourself, and it's
not helping anybody at all.
Yeah, all it does is just polarize like the arguments, and it's kind of like, I don't want to get too political, but it's like the divide, like this social media has been so divisive that I think it's starting to do more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that you can use it both ways, but I definitely think there's a dark side, and you know, we really want to try to change that, and you know, encourage people to be more positive and be more constructive, and to add something to the conversation rather than just throwing shade and hating on people, because that just gets us nowhere. And like you said, just polarizes the topic more and creates more separation. And that's just like the opposite direction we need to go in this community.
Yeah, I mean, because like honestly, there was a lot of good points that people brought up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can say the same thing, but like have an open conversation about it. And like, you know, maybe you would learn, you know, it seems like you have done some self-reflection upon this accident, and it seems like you might, you know, have changed a couple things depending on, you know, what you're feeling. But someone just like hating on you and throwing this negative energy isn't going to do anything except just make you pissed off, you know, and it's not going to get anybody anywhere.
Yeah, like there's some people that probably said something along the lines of like, oh, I don't care what happened, like he deserves it. It's like, yeah, it might be true, but like it just adds nothing. You can be like, yeah, I don't agree with what he did, but you know, blah blah blah. I don't like social media, and I use it more than I should.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Max, you got anything else before we kind of jump into these final words here?
No, I think I'm kind of pretty good I think we've covered a lot here and had a great conversation. So I think there's a couple final points here we can touch on and then go from there.
Cool, man. Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, open up just a few questions, you know, as we close this conversation. You know, if there was any message that you want to share with a budding climber or someone who's considering soloing, like, what would it be? Like, do you have that's just a general message for someone? It could be anything.
Yeah, I don't know, just because I don't want to be like the reason someone does or doesn't do something that's a very personal decision.
I mean, okay, maybe take soloing out of it and just speak to a new climber.
Just just have fun, honestly. Like, I feel like, I don't know, climbing just gotten very grade chasing the last couple of years. And like, it's always, everyone likes to improve and see their own improvements. But like, some of the best days are just out there doing the easy stuff because you're not stressed at all about like being scared or not sure if you can do the moves or not.
That's an awesome message. And I think that drives so close to home for me. You know, I really started getting into that hype of chasing grades and attaching it to my ego of how hard I was climbing and getting pissed at myself for not progressing. And I kind of like, I loved climbing, but I think that like you said, some of my best days were up on the mountains climbing 5.7, 5.8. And those are the ones that I remember. I don't really remember, climbing 5.12, sport on site or whatever. So yeah, it's just a really, really awesome message that you just shared.
Yeah. I mean, I spent like my first 5 years bouldering. I trained I took it as serious as you could. And then I kind of started to get burnt out for a couple of years after that, just because I got weaker, and it's like you start getting frustrated. And then once I started rope climbing and started just doing like 5.8s, 5.9s, like, all right, this is well below my strength level, but like being 500 feet up, even if it's easy, is a lot cooler than doing some hard moves 2 feet off the ground.
Yeah, I think that was such a great point you brought up. And I know I've experienced that as well too, like wrapping up my value as a climber or my identity as a climber with like how hard I can climb. And I'm not a very good climber in the realm of like good climbers, so it's like constantly feeling frustrated and like depressed and like insufficient. And I totally agree with you. Like all my best days out in the mountains, really just loving it and like having an amazing time. And, like that experience isn't diminished because I'm climbing 5.8, 5.9, it's like that, those are just magical moments in the mountains and shouldn't be taken for granted.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easier for me to say this because now that I've gotten injured, it's kind of like I'm never going to I don't know if I'll ever get to a high level again. So like for me, it's kind of easier to just accept it. And like now I look back, it's like, all right, well, I don't remember the times I climbed this high grade or whatever, but it's like, oh, there was that time I did that peak. It might have been 5.6, but like I was the only person up there.
Yeah, I think that, this is something I drove in my episode, and that's something that you just kind of said, now that is taken away from us, it's easy to accept and just focus on the easier climbing. I think that the message for someone who's not injured and who is kind of feeling like, chasing grades, I really want to just like say, like, what's the point? Why are you chasing grades? Like, are you trying to become a professional climber? Like, what is the reason? Is it because of your ego? Are you trying to impress yourself? Like, what is the reason? Because for me, chasing grades, other than trying to become a professional climber, I don't see much of a point anymore. And being a professional climber isn't climbing 12s. It's not even climbing 13s anymore. Like, you have to be this crazy sender climber, and that takes years of experience and the perfect body, and like everything goes into it these days to be a professional climber. And even then, like, if you're scraping 13s and you're doing this, there's other things that go into it. There's marketability. There's whether you can create content around your climbing. Like,
I was gonna say, I was about to disagree with you on the like strength aspect of professional climbing. It's like social media now. It's like you can be a professional climber and climb 5.11 because, like you said, you can market yourself or you know how to produce content.
Now, professional climber, what does that mean to you? Just that you have social media attention, or that you're being paid by brands to climb your projects?
I mean, to me, it's someone that climbs for a living and that's their main income source. Like, however that's derived within that context, like maybe they're just paid by their brand ambassadors, or maybe they're climbing 5.15 high-end stuff. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, but you bring up an interesting point. But yeah, I mean, I guess just my biggest takeaway here is just like, ask yourself why. And if you don't really have a good reason for why you're trying to chase the grades, maybe reassess kind of what your priorities are, and just take into account what we're saying about, the real essence of climbing and how it's adventure and having fun and being safe. Because if you are pushing grades and you injure yourself and you can't chase grades anymore, or you can't climb anymore, you're immediately going to be regretful, and you're immediately going to, be like us and be like, well, it's not really worth it.
I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, I still think pushing grades is worth it, because it's like the reason I pushed grades wasn't to just prove to some random people I could climb that number. It was to show that like I'm progressing and it's more like, for me, it was always about pushing myself. Like, all right, I did V10, let's go for V11. Like, there's no end.
Yeah, I think if you're getting enjoyment out of that process and that feels right for you, then that's good. But like asking the question is like once again, if you're interested in self-improvement and just challenging yourself for the sake of challenging yourself, that seems to be like the right reason to be doing that, right? But yeah, I think like moving on here, I'm just wondering maybe like from this experience, like it seems kind of like a, like dumb question, I guess, but like, what is your biggest takeaway from this? Like, if you could think of like one thing that's just, really gnawing at you.
It fucking sucks. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't think I came away with like some sort of, I don't know. Yeah, it happened. I hate it. Like, I never would have thought it could happen, and apparently it could.
Yeah.
The statistics weren't at 0% for me falling, and I realized that small bit of statistical probability, but somehow lived. I don't know. It just sucks.
Do you think that in soloing there ever is a 0% chance that you're never going to fall?
In climbing, there is never a 0% chance that you won't fall. Not even like.
Regardless, yeah, it's always lingering there in the background.
I think it's just soloing is there's just a higher percentage that you die if you fall.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, assuming full responsibility for.
I mean, honestly, like
for performance.
People look so negatively on soloing because people die when they do it, but like the people that climb the 8,000 meter peaks, there's more death in that than maybe any sport in the world other than like base jumping. Like every year people die on a mountain up there.
Yep.
And they've accepted that risk, and there's definitely times where people are in like the 8,000 meter zone and they can't move on anymore, and then it puts other people in positions where they have to decide, do we try to help this person and risk our lives, or do we just leave this person here and accept that, or they have to accept the risk that they're probably just going to die there. So it's just interesting that like in that realm of the climbing world that it's completely acceptable, and like climbing, I don't know, soloing,
it's not. Yeah, and it's shamed.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because not that many people. I mean, people die soloing, but like compared to the amount of people that climb in general, it's not that high.
Yeah, it is an interesting perspective that society has. Alex Honnold being glorified, people in the big mountains is glorified. I think that people, society needs some sort of reason to attach the risk to, and yeah, I guess some people are missing that for the everyday soloist, which seems unfair.
Yeah, I don't even know. It can happen. That's all I can say.
Well, cool. I think that's an awesome place to leave it, Max.
Yeah. I guess just last thing would be like, is there anything else you want to share with the audience, or are you good to leave it at that, Josh?
Yeah, I've got nothing.
Totally, man. Yeah. Well,
I have no inspirational words.
That's fair enough.
Fair, yeah.
I just want to say thanks so much for, coming on and taking the time to talk to us and everything. And I think this has been a really powerful, impactful conversation. And, I told you previously that I read your story while I was actually in the hospital, and I found it really impactful. And, I'm sure there's lots of other people who are gonna feel the same. So yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today, man.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it was a good chat.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Cool. Well, awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much.
I think we're good to go here, but I just want to say, man, I wish you all the best with your recovery and everything like that. And thanks for sharing your story today.
Totally.
Yeah. Hope your guys' continues to go well too.
Thanks, man.
Sweet. Yeah. Take care, man.
Have an awesome day.
All right. Have a good one, guys.